All right, so some of you may be a little bit confused by the new direction I've chosen as of late. Do not be. Why? It's really pretty simple and straightforward, so let's try and clarify. If you are in a debate and an atheist will grant you these two starting points. Now, keep in mind, almost all atheists, all the smart atheists will probably grant you these. Either the laws of logic exist or mathematical axioms exist. A lot of atheists will grant you that. 85 to 90% of the atheists you're going to be in a public debate will grant you that. Matt Dillahunty granted the laws of logic on two separate occasions. Yes, the laws of logic exist. They are inviolate, transcendent, immaterial, and invisible. Think of what he is already agreeing to. Okay? If there's only two atheists I can think of who go in public debates who won't grant you those two starting points. For example, Elia, who's also a pre-supper, was in a debate with another guy who granted the laws of logic. Most atheists will grant you at least the laws of logic and at least the law of identity. There are some laws of logic that there's a dispute about. I think it's the law of excluded middle. There's some controversy over whether that's in fact a law of logic. So they don't have to grant you a whole bunch of transcendental categories, just two. Mathematical axiom, laws of logic, most simply law of identity. Almost every atheist in the public sphere will grant you that, except probably Aaron Ra and one other guy I can think of. And Aaron Ra, as we all know, is not exactly the most philosophically robust of the guy in the atheist community. There's a reason why a lot of times he says things that are incoherent, okay? Because he doesn't have really good philosophical grounding for the things that he believes. If they grant you those two starting points, the laws of logic and mathematical axioms, if they don't, you have a proof. It's called Gödel's incompleteness theorem. I've said enough times in enough videos, but you have to assume the mathematical axiom one more time. You have to assume the mathematical axiom in order to use the mathematical axiom. Believe that proof also works for the laws of logic. Matt Dillahunty cited it when he was discussing his debate with either Jay Dyer or Tyler Vila. So that's the starting point. If they grant you those starting points, think of what the atheist is already admitting to. Keep in mind, Matt Dillahunty granted those starting points on two separate occasions. Yes, the laws of logic exist. They are inviolate, immaterial, invisible, and transcendent. He said that. I didn't. Does that sound suspiciously to you like he is already granting you a place in between theism and atheism? Because he is. That's my point. Tyler Vila went into the debate to try and, critique Thomas Nagel. I'm going into the debate to try and get Matt Dillahunty to be a little bit more like Thomas Nagel. Thomas Nagel is actually a very, very nuanced, robust philosophical thinker. I started reading his book, Minded Cosmos. It's really pretty complex, but eventually I will process that all into the stuff I'm talking about. It shouldn't be all that hard to get an atheist from an Aaron Ra atheist to a Thomas Nagel type atheist. Why? Because a lot of them will grant you the starting points anyways. There are some atheists out there, okay, who automatically latch on to the metaphysical presuppositions that are most closely associated with atheism. So if you're talking philosophy of math, they'll call themselves a fictionalist. Philosophy of mind, a physicalist or an eliminative materialist. In general philosophy, materialist, physicalist. In, the metaphysics of no metaphysics, the Scientism, which is basically the science of, the philosophy of there's no philosophy, only science. Now, let's just take those two, materialism and Scientism. Those positions, it's not automatically, I'm not automatically telling you that those positions are false. Those are positions held to by at least 60% of the atheist community as of right now. Most of the people in the atheist community are physicalists / materialists and Scientismists. They will say they're not, but in fact they are. They just don't really know what it means. What it is in a short, rough-hand version is the philosophy of we don't need philosophy anymore, there's just science. Now, it's not a given that that's a false position, okay? Keep in mind, that position, Scientismist, is held to by some really pretty accomplished people. Neil deGrasse Tyson is a Scientismist. Stephen Hawking was a scientism. Stephen Hawking is a lot smarter than I am, right? Yeah, probably. Okay. Stephen Hawking was a scientism. He literally would say things like, we're done with philosophy. Philosophy is over. It's just science that is going to further our understanding of the world. A lot of atheists say stuff that's very close in spirit to that. The problem is, for even someone as intelligent as Stephen Hawking, you can be really intelligent and have incoherent, logically contradictory positions. So you ask Stephen Hawking, if you're in a debate with him, respectfully, because he's smarter than you are too, but you ask him respectfully, hey, that scientific theory over there, why do you think that one isn't successful? And he'll probably tell you, well, it's not very parsimonious. And you go, aha, gotcha, Stephen Hawking. I gotcha. What does parsimonious mean? That is a concept that he borrowed from what? Philosophy. Hello? There's no such thing as a scientific concept of parsimony. It is something he borrowed from what? Philosophy. If he uses Occam razor, where did he get that from? Philosophy. There is no such thing as the philosophy of we're done with philosophy. It is self-refuting and self-contradictory. The only reason really, really highly intelligent people don't notice that is because they weren't trained in philosophy, so they don't really actually examine what they actually think. They don't really examine their thought processes. So they hold to positions almost automatically. It's what I've been calling the whole time metaphysical a priori assumptions about the world. A perfectly famous example that I've brought up a few times is Sean Carroll. Again, knows physics a lot better than I do. If you ask him, is he a physicalist, he will say yes. And he will literally say, yes, I'm a physicalist. Why? Because I'm a scientist. He thinks it is synonymous with scientist. A lot of scientists think that. Because as we entered the 20th century, what science started to do, science is agnostics on metaphysics and philosophy. That is, metaphysics is the purview of philosophy. As we entered the 20th century, science is in the business of building models to predict outcomes. It is effectively agnostic on what things in fact are. And it is a lot easier at a sophisticated, highly intellectual, cerebral level that our science functions at today to strip things down to their essence, reduce everything to strictly physical properties, take away metaphysical assignations. Why it's a lot easier to build a sophisticated model to predict an outcome if you strip away everything else and just talk about properties interacting. That's why it's been so astonishingly successful. Physicalism / materialism, the reason why so many scientists think it is synonymous with science is because it was so astonishingly successful. The method they use is generally methodological naturalism. And then the practice is reduce everything to what? To just physical properties. Almost everything in the physical world easily reduces to just physical properties. So they were astonishingly successful at building models to predict outcomes. There are only two glaring exceptions, and those two glaring exceptions mean we have to shift metaphysical a priori assumptions. What are they? The hard problem of consciousness? Some people out there are now saying it's not a real thing, it doesn't exist. Yes, it does. And if you think you've solved that one, the even more glaring and obvious problem, the measurement problem in physics. They are of the same cloth. Now, as I've said in videos in the past, I'm going to start using stuff from the past because people were actually really starting to get it. Okay? If the choice is binary between materialism and idealism, idealism wins hands down. Why? Because materialism is insufficient to explain the data points. If you don't believe in the hard problem of consciousness, wrap your pretty little head around this. Why? Because this debunks materialism just as successfully and, completely cataclysmically. There's a couch in front of me. What color? There's an object in the room in front of you. What color is that object? It's a trick question. It's a trick question. Why? Because the object in front of you has no actual color. If you are talking just materialism, just material facts about an object in front of you and strip it away to just its object-based ontology, what something in fact intrinsically is according to its properties, there is no such thing as a color. Period. That's a fact. Why? Because the color is you interacting with said item. So there's a couch in front of me. It is presenting itself to me as white. It is not, in fact, white. Why? Because if you strip away just the material properties of the couch, there's no color in them at all. That's what Mary's room is trying to get people to understand. We have people say, the guy disavowed Mary's room. It doesn't matter if he disavowed Mary's room. Why? Because it's only trying to get you to understand the obvious. You cannot account for color according to the material facts about an item. Why? Because you are giving it the color. The color is coming from the interaction. The light bounces off the object and interacts with you, with your retina, with your visual cortex. That's what gives it the color. You're giving it the color. It's not a part of the property itself. If the couch was sitting in a room and no one was there to look at it, what color would it be? It would not have one. A little bit easier to understand, same principle. If a tree falls in the forest and nobody's there to hear it, does it make a sound? No. It just moves the air. The sound is only produced on the interaction with your eardrum. That's the only thing that produces sound. Other than that, it's just vibrating air. The vibrating air has to interact with something in order to produce a sound. Now, quantum mechanics demonstrates this at the quantum level really obviously, as I've pointed out time and time again. Carlo Rovelli will tell you there is no such thing as properties per se at the quantum level. There are only relative properties. Properties that are derived upon interaction with other properties. That's why he calls it relational quantum mechanics. And it is a fact. And that fact successfully annihilates materialism as a candidate option. Now, let's just say for argument's sake, you're arguing with that. Okay, I object to that, blah, blah, blah. Okay, fine, whatever. We can debate that another day. Moving right along, because it's not the point of the video. The only thing you need to know about that is there are two ontologies to any given item in front of you. An object-based ontology, which are its material facts, which materialism can account for, and its context-based ontology, which materialism is insufficient to explain. The context-based ontology is a part of something. Kant noticed this 100 years before quantum mechanics. He told you about the difference between the thing in itself and your perception of the thing in itself. There's a slight variation therein. That slight variation will account for the hard problem of consciousness and the measurement problem of physics. So it means I can account for all of it as an experience in consciousness. There's a couch in front of me, okay? Color white. Properties, these are the properties of that couch, its color is white, as an experience of consciousness. As a set of just material properties, I can't account for the color at all. Why? Because it's not intrinsic to the thing in itself. It requires a visual experience of the couch. You get it now? If you don't get it, just trust me, we can debate it later. Moving right along, it's not the point of the video. The point of the video, okay, when we started the 20th century, science had become, based off of an influence of logical positivism, Scientism was born, the stepchild of logical positivism. It is, roughly speaking, the philosophy that science doesn't need philosophy. We don't do that anymore. Why? We're scientists. Science alone will explain how the world works. Except the people who say that aren't really good philosophers, including Stephen Hawking. You can be an exceptionally brilliant human being and really bad at philosophy. Why? Because they weren't trained in it. You have to think philosophically in order to be good at it. He's great at whatever it is. I don't even think he's a physicist. I'm not sure exactly what he is. Carlo Rovelli is the new person in town who has actually started out as being trained as a scientist like everybody else. They drill materialism into your head. They drill it, physicalism/materialism, into your head morning, noon, and night. That is why it is really hard for them to think of the material world as anything other than that. Quantum mechanics, again, as I've said 1,000 times, ain't all that trippy. It just shattered the paradigm that they thought, it shattered what they thought they were going to find when they started looking. It is inconsistent with physicalism/materialism altogether. Now, moving right along, let's just say you agree with that for argument's sake, because I'm going somewhere with the whole video. If you don't, I'll debate you, bro, at some point or another. Not right now. Put down your puny little objections in the comments section and I'll peruse them for a good laugh. How about that? I'll peruse them. What an idiot. So, moving right along. It is not 60% of the people in the atheist community out there today. Granted, these are for the most part the debate me bro goofball atheists, but it's still a huge chunk of the atheist community. Hold to physicalism/materialism as a philosophy and hold to scientism as a philosophy. The philosophy that we don't need philosophy anymore. And they will sometimes tell you, well, that's not a very parsimonious, those data points, that's not very parsimonious with the data point. They're using philosophy. When we talk about interpretations of quantum mechanics, what are we using? Philosophy. There's no such thing as a philosophy as there is no philosophy. We use philosophy to guide our scientific findings all the freaking time. And even scientism have been doing it the whole time. That's why it is self-refuting. Why? Because we use philosophy. Parsimonious as a principle is rooted in philosophy. Talking about interpretations of quantum mechanics, those are philosophies. That's why these things started to get really confusing for scientists. The original interpretation of quantum mechanics, the Copenhagen interpretation, is not an interpretation. Just, what do they call it? Just run the data. Shut up and calculate. Let's not interpret it. That's our interpretation. We don't want to interpret it. Why? It doesn't make any sense to us. Shut up and calculate. And that was basically the default interpretation for a long time, till Carlo Rovelli came along and started tinkering around with it. Why? Because he's a philosopher. He actually said, I need to train myself in philosophy to think differently about how the world so that I can make sense of quantum mechanics. He's literally said those words. Literally. That's why he started studying a specific type of Buddhism, Naja Kuma, I forget what the guy's name is. Now, it's not a given. When I started this 4 or 5 years ago, okay, it was not a given that scientism and materialism would be false positions. If I started investigating, and let's just say for argument's sake, I found out that they were true positions, okay, that people were right when they were saying science is going, we don't need philosophy anymore, it's only science, and they were right when they were holding to physicalism/materialism, I would still be a Christian. Why? Because as I've explained numerous times in my video, my Christianity was born from a religious experience, and I have manifold thousands of those religious experiences over the course of the last 15 years. There's nothing I could do to disavow them. I couldn't pretend like I didn't have them. So I'd still be a theist. I'd still be, maybe not a Christian, but I'd still be a theist, even if those two positions were completely proven false. But I'd be looking 100 years down the field, and I'd be pretty sure that there was going to be a lot less of me theists around. Why? Because those positions, atheism logically follows from those two starting points. If physicalism/materialism were true, so if you're an atheist, here's your hope. Other than that, deconverted man, here's your hope. If physicalism/materialism is true, atheism logically follows from that position. Other than that, deconverted man, I can smell your freaking tides from here. I can taste his freaking tides. I can taste the tides. I love it. Give me the money. Come on, let me hear your money talk. Deconverted man is rich, guys. He can afford numerous beautiful, plenteous tides. Oh, I love it. So, I can smell his tides from here. Why? Because those two positions are false. Scientism and materialism. If they were true, and I'd tell you straight up, I wouldn't mince words. I would tell you, scientism is true and materialism is true. And guess what, folks? 100 years down the field, there's going to be very few theists about. Why? Because atheism automatically follows from those positions. If those were the metaphysical starting points, presuppositions that you start with, atheism would be a logical outpouring of that, logical conclusion of those two starting points. And I'd be looking 100 years down the field and saying there are going to be a lot more atheists and a lot less of me. As it is, and I tell you that straight up. Why? Because my Christian belief is based on religious experiences. It's why I became a Christian. There's nothing I could do to disavow that or pretend that they didn't happen or pretend that I don't believe them. Nothing. There's no taking those away from me. That's why I get mad when people start to jujitsu me. Why? Because there's no taking that away from me. It is an experiential claim, not a faith claim, as I've explained thousands of times. If I smell a bottle of lavender oil and I tell you that lavender oil makes me feel drowsy, I'm not saying anything by faith at all. I'm saying it makes me feel drowsy. That's how it makes me feel, period. Ditto if I tell you I put on worship music and I have a feeling that the Christians describe as the peace of God. Okay, we don't have to believe it's God. But the feeling the experience that I tell you I'm having is provable fact. Provable fact. If I took you to my church, you can look it up today. Self-Transcendent Experience. The part of it that is subject, I'm telling you I feel peace of mind, is also provable fact. If you go look at someone like David Yardley or Andrew Nuremberg, I think is his name, you'll find that out today. Keep saying science is on my side. That's what I mean. If I drug you to my church, if I grabbed you by the hand, took you kicking and screaming, I go to church, great. Shut up, you go to church. Shut up, you stupid, itchy church pants. Shut up, you go to church. If I have to drag you there with my bare hands, put you right smack dab in the middle of my church, and you're complaining the whole time, I ain't this Craig. Stupid, itchy church pants. You ever see that? That's a classic Simpsons, by the way, when Homer skips church on a Sunday. Oh, it's phenomenal. That's what he says, his stupid, itchy church pants. He doesn't want to go to church, so he opts out. And we interrupt this program to bring you a football game. He's like, woo! And then he's like, is this the best day of my life? And he has this really awesome day. So he stops going to church altogether. It's really awesome. It's brilliant Simpsons. It's one of my favorite episodes of all time. It's classic. Look it up. I'm sure you can find it on YouTube. It's great. So, Dad, the heathen is getting away. I see him, son. Ned Flanders. It's brilliant. Anyways, moving right along. So, if I drug you, an atheist, to church, and your instructions were pretend to like it and participate along with the religiotards and sing their songs, and you sang the songs and you participated to try and see if you had an experience for yourself, I can tell you exactly what you'd feel. You wouldn't believe it's God necessarily, but you would actually, as a scientific fact, start to feel more closely bonded to the people you were singing along with, a communal experience of sorts, and you'd start to feel that self-transcendent experience. It's a scientific fact. You felt it at a rock concert. Correct. Prior to me becoming a Christian, I had experiences that I would have called spiritual at a rock concert. Why? It's a low-resolution spiritual experience. It is basically the same thing, and there is a science to it. You start to feel connected to the people around you, and you start to feel connected to the performer. That doesn't necessarily mean that you feel that's God descending into the place, but you start to feel exactly what Christians say when they say, I feel the peace of God. You'd start to feel the exact same freaking thing. That's a scientific fact. The time I felt that most profoundly before I was a Christian, Santana. There was a time I went to see Santana on the pier. Yeah, it was a great show. Santana's actually a phenomenal guitarist. And as we used to do back then, we lit a spleef or two before, so we were pretty high. And he hit that one note, and the whole place was like, wah, together as one. It's a communal experience. You start to transcend yourself. God or no God. That experience happens to people all the freaking time. God or no God. You understand that, right? That's a scientific fact. So if I drug you to church with my bare hands, put you right smack dab in the middle of the place and say, shut up and worship. Shut up. I don't want to worship. Shut up. You're worshiping. Then you would feel, you would not necessarily become a Christian, but you would 100% understand why that was real to me. And then if I told you that you could dial those experiences up so that they're 50 times more real to you, that there's a science and a methodology to that, and I gave you the training utensils. This is how you make that experience more pronounced next time you're in church. There's a science and a methodology to that. I've explained that in other videos. I'll go into that in details of videos that come. Then you'd have that experience a lot more intensely. You know, you would, if you're an atheist listening to me, of course you'd find some other explanation. I just gave you the other explanations. Yes, there's a science to it. You start to feel like connected to the other people there in the room, and you start to feel connected to the music. It's called a self-transcendent experience. You've had it at a concert. The only thing I'm adding new is that you can dial that experience up so that it's 100% more real to you. It becomes really hard it starts to feel like God. That's the only thing I'm saying. I'm saying it is God. I'm saying when you give yourself an experience like that, that's really powerful, and you can make it more powerful by virtue of the choices you make going into the place, what a Christian will call being prayed up, you can make that experience 100 times more subjectively real to you. The problem, it's volitional, it's choice, period. It's a choice. In order to do that, you'd have to want to do it. I can teach you how to do it, and then you could give yourself an experience, and you go, wait, I get it now. I understand why Craig is so, why Craig is so sold on this stuff. Why? Because it honestly does feel like God. It honestly does. So, Leaving that aside for the time being. Why? Because, you'd have to want to do that in order for me to give you that experience. That's why I moved to other things. So, what we were originally talking about, if I were looking 100 years down the field, and I knew for a fact, I had gone exploring Scientism and Materialism, and I had gone, wait a minute, these are actually true positions, I would be telling you straight up, I'm sort of in trouble. Why? Because 100 years from now, there's going to be 20 of me and thousands of you. But I'm telling you the opposite. Doesn't matter what you argue, whatever you're arguing in modern day debate. Well, modern day debate doesn't really work anymore. I watched Dr. Josh and Skylar. Maybe I'll do a video on that. It was fun. It was fun. There's the first video. There's the first show of their modern day debate I've watched like one in the last 2 months. I used to watch them once a week. Yeah, maybe I'll do a video on that. We'll see. I'd be telling you straight up. I'd be telling you the truth. There's no reason for me to hide the information from you and be like, there's going to be a lot less of me. Why? Because materialism is true and scientism is true. And from those things, it doesn't automatically follow that there isn't a God, but atheism, the position, does kind of logically follow from those two starting points. That's why there are a lot of atheists around. Historically, there used to be none. Why? Because a lot of people do think materialism is true, and a lot of people do think scientism is true. Most of the people in the atheist community hold to those two positions. I'd say 60%. The other people are the ones I'm talking about. Those are people like Thomas Nagel, who have a nuanced, in-between position that is in between theism and atheism. It isn't quite an atheist. It isn't. And as I said, I've started delving into mind and cosmos. I haven't really started it yet, but I'm going to, deconstruct it. I have a feeling it's going to be astonishingly complex, but it is a nuanced middle position between theism and atheism. The only mistake Tyler Veland made was not letting Matt Dillahunty be that. You aren't going to take Matt Dillahunty in a debate. You are not going to move him from atheism to theism. That's just not an achievable goal. If that's your goal, don't bother, because that is not going to happen. But you could very easily move him, which he already did a little. That's my point. That's why I say that these arguments need to be investigated. And if you're getting tripped out on presupposition, don't. The thing that I just told you about the presuppositional argument, if you want to compare it to, it's very, very close to Phaser's 5 proofs number 4. The argument from eternal truth, which is, he uses math too. It's a very similar argument. So don't get thrown that I'm using the word presupposition. I understand that they have a really bad reputation. Okay? Do not get thrown by that. What I just told you is the starting point that almost every atheist in town will grant you. Yes, the laws of logic exist. Yes, mathematical axioms exist. 85% of the atheists, 90% will grant you those starting points. If they grant you those starting points, like Matt Dillahunty did, okay, there's no reason to move them past that needle. Why? Because the needle is already there. They're already in an in-between nuanced position. Why did Matt Dillahunty do it? Because it's a precondition of intelligibility. How did he describe the law of logic? He said they're inviolate, immaterial, transcendent, and invisible. That sounds suspiciously to my theist-leaning ears. Ring-a-ding-ding, ring-a-ding-ding, dinner is served. We're going to gobble up an atheist. That sounds suspiciously to me like something akin to theism. It isn't quite atheism anymore, is it? No, Thomas Nagel is not quite an atheist. He's not. John Vervaeke certainly is not quite an atheist. He's not. He's somewhere in between. He calls himself a Neoplatonist, some form of a reconciliation. If you go watch freaking Joe Schmidt things, a lot of what he talks about is Platonism, math. He is a Platonist. If any of you watched Penrose, was on Jordan Peterson yesterday. It was a really interesting conversation. Jordan Peterson, Penrose is a Platonist, a mathematical Platonist. That is a theist-friendly position. You don't need to talk somebody out of Platonism. You need to talk the dopey atheist into Platonism or nominalism. That's my point. That's why I think these are really, really strong forms of argumentation that need to be explored further. Why? Because you're not going to move an atheist from atheism to theism. What you are going to move an atheist from is from Aaron Ross-style atheism to nuanced in-between atheism and theism, a la Thomas Nagel. And the starting point is, if they grant you the starting point, mathematical axioms, laws of logic, they're pretty much there. There's not much more you need to accomplish past that point. After that, it's like what Ron said. Be cool and reasonable. That's it. Game over. Game over. Barring that, you need a religious experience. And, I can teach anybody listening to me how to have a religious experience. I can teach, all of you have had them in other contexts. You had them at a rock concert. You had them at a wherever. I could teach you easily how to have a religious experience. More importantly, I could teach you how to dial it up to 11 so it's really powerful and real to you. Once you do that, you might still go, it's not God. It starts becoming a lot harder to shake it off. Why? Because it really feels like God. That's it. That's the only thing I'm ever claiming. It really honestly starts to feel like God. If you get good at having religious experiences or spiritual experiences if you prefer, self-transcendent experiences if you prefer, there's scientific fact to these type of experiences. They happen all the time. Go look up David Yardley if you do not believe me. Whenever atheists say prayer doesn't work, they cite one dopey study like, yeah, okay, maybe I can't pray Ron healing on Ron's arm when he's in Arkansas. I can't pray from here, heal Ron's arm. That's the study. But prayer works absolutely, positively of like transforming your inner circuitry of your mind. Absolutely. You know for a fact it works. Why? Because placebos work. That's why they call it a placebo instead of a sugar pill. Why? Because it does something to your to your mind. By believing, you actually transform your own inner circuitry and your brain chemistry. Everybody understand that that's a fact, correct? The only thing I'm telling you is you can do that to yourself. That's it. I can give myself an experience wherein I start to feel automatically more peaceful and more resolute. Disappear into my prayer closet. I have a powerful, subjective, internal experience that's 100% real to me. The only thing I'm telling you is if I teach you how to do it, it does feel like God, period. You could have the experience to decide for yourself. If I drug you to church and you were instructed to sing along with me, you'd bristle at first. I don't want to sing these filthy Christian songs. But then you'd start getting into the spirit of the thing and you'd start to be transformed, period. Transcendent. That's what they call it. It's just like it happens at a concert, it's happened to you at a concert. The only difference is you're not resistant at a concert, you want to be there. But it's the exact same principle. And no, it's not manipulative at all. Or, maybe it is manipulative. It seems like the wrong word, but yeah, you could say that Guns N' Roses is manipulating you when you go to a concert. That's exactly what talent is. Getting you into the spirit of the thing. Forget your troubles. There was the Bob Marley song? Forget your sickness and dance. Forget your... I forget it. And the weak they must get song. They singing, oh, what a tribulation. That's what a talented musician is doing. What? Getting you to forget your daily cares and start to get into the spirit of the event. So you start to feel lifted, transcend. It's the same thing that happens in a church. It's the same exact thing. It's nothing different. I'm not adding anything new. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. The only new piece of information I'm giving you is that I can train you once you have a low resolution experience like that to amplify it, to make it more vivid and real to you, the experiencer, 100 times more real to you. And then once you do that, you can decide for yourself. I'm just telling you it starts to really literally feel like God. It's the only thing I'm ever claiming. Experiential claim, not a faith claim. It's not a faith claim. It's not. I didn't tell you anything outside of the real material world. You understand that there are places called churches, correct? Correct, okay. And in those places people gather to sing songs and sing worship music, correct? Correct. Some of you already have your favorite worship song. It probably does it to you a tiny little bit already. Part of me becoming a Christian, that's part of why I was so addicted to the radio. Why? Because sometimes there are certain songs that do that to you already. Right? You have your favorite song in the secular world. It's usually giving you a small, low dose transcendent experience already. That's why you feel lifted and a little better when you listen to it. Correct? Correct. I'm not telling you anything all that unusual or all that weird. I'm not making an extraordinary claim. I'm just telling you the God's honest truth. And there is a science to it. You don't have to believe it's God. The only thing I'm telling you is if you practice those rituals and you learn how to amplify and make it more vivid and real to yourself, they start to feel like God. A lot, a lot, convincingly so. So there you have it. Now, the more important part of why I started the video, it's not a given. Okay, and then I'll wrap it up real quick. It's not a given that scientism and materialism are false. If you didn't object to my debunking of materialism, if you objected to my debunking of materialism in the beginning of this video, I haven't talked about that particular debunking in a long time, but it's basically case closed as far as I'm concerned. Why? Because the material facts do not give you the full, do not tell you enough. When you strip something down to just its material substrate, you are not getting enough information. The important details about the thing in itself are being left off of the table. You cannot just reduce something to its physical properties and get the whole story. There are a lot of things about it you can't learn just by its physical, what its physical properties are. For example, its color. That requires an experience in consciousness, period. There's no such thing as a color of an item. So try and imagine, and I used to talk about this a lot more. Take a look at the world around you. Okay, a lot of the things going on in the world around you, you are filtering information. For example, there are millions of particles floating around right in front of your face right now. You cannot see. Why can't you see them? It would be very not useful to you to see them. But they're there, invisible particles. Your mind is inferring. This is a scientific fact, guys. This is not up for debate. This is actually how you process reality. You infer and you make guesses. You re-represent it back to yourself in a way that is more useful to you. You are not seeing reality as it in fact is at all. Not even close. The desk in front of you is not solid matter. That's what you're presenting it to yourself as. It is particles in motion. We know that for a fact. It has no color. It has no color. You are giving it to, you are just designating the color. The color is the interaction of the light bouncing off the item in your visual cortex. There's no such thing as a color of an item. Therefore, if you reduce all the physical properties, that's what Mary's room is trying to get you to understand. If you reduce all the physical properties of a desk, there's no such thing as a color. Why? Because it's the visual experience that makes the color. That's where the color comes from. Experience in consciousness of the desk. So, as far as I'm concerned, that's a slam dunk. If you want to debate it, Stephanie, stay. I'll get him! I'll get him! Yeah, see? So there you go. There you have it, kids. With that, I will wrap up this particular video. That is all for now. The Mass has ended. Go in peace. Amen.